I'm fantastic. How are you?
Good. I feel like I owe you like 50,000 congratulations on so many
Oh,
things.
I mean, my life has changed a bit since I last saw you. So,
I know.
um, but all good things. So thank you. It's great to see you. We are live on Facebook. So we should be ready to go. Thank you for adjusting your schedule. We've had a long morning here in the city of Scranton, but we're getting some good things done. Um, yeah, you never know what's going to pop up, really. And what I'm dealing with also on a personal level is my parents are in Beaverton, Oregon, and there are fires all around them, and they say that they're fine. But Mom, if you're on, please let me know if that changes. And I I trust my parents to be very responsible, but it is a tough situation out there, and I think 500,000 people have been evacuated in Oregon, which is probably an eighth of the population, which is really intense. So we thinking good thoughts for everybody out west that's dealing with fires. And I started my day off today at a 9/11 memorial ceremony that was really well done, well attended. We had lots of the Scranton Police Department, Scranton Fire Department there representing the city, and just wanted to start off today by thanking everyone for being there every day in the police department, the fire department, not just in Scranton, but across the country, of course, and all of our emergency, not only our EMTs, but our nurses and doctors who are at those hospitals when there are emergencies. So hope that nothing like that ever happens again. But today is a day that we remember 9/11 so that we never forget it. And it's we're at that point that we knew would happen, where we have kids that are graduating high school and in college that weren't even alive during 9/11. So we have to keep the memory of that alive and always be grateful for our first responders. So speaking of college kids, today we have Seth Frotman with us to talk about student loans and student debt. A few weeks ago on one of these town halls, I got a question about with COVID, what are some of the programs and things that people with student debt or who are students now, are there things that they can access to help them right now in this time of high unemployment? And we know there are so many folks out there that maybe thought they were graduate and go into a job, or we're already in the workforce, but we're going to switch jobs. And those jobs are currently, not available, not open. So there's a lot of people out there that are really struggling financially. And I wanted Seth to come on to talk about some of the things that might be out there to help support people now. But Seth is an expert in student loan debt generally. And so you guys in the live chat, you can ask questions, lots of different questions of Seth if you have questions about that student loan debt. Seth I don't have the bio right in front of me as I should.
That's okay.
But Seth worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau for a very long time down in Washington. Seth and I know each other because we have a lot of people in common. When I was in Washington, I worked at the U.S. Treasury Department at the time that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, was stood up. So Seth and I are lucky to have a lot of mutual friends who are much smarter than I am, as is Seth. And he can answer a lot of different questions for you. And Seth's been fighting for borrowers, for folks with student loans for his whole career, and is committed to that fight and committed to making sure that we have, we're not losing generations of wealth out there because people can't pay their student loans. It's a real problem in our country, and one that's being exacerbated by the pandemic. So that's a lot. So Seth, I'll kind of kick it to you to maybe give us a little bit of overview of what you do and some of the things that are going on in your world.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I feel like you and I have been talking about these issues for a really long period of time. So I'm just honored to be here. And I think the folks who are watching should just know that you are not coming to this issue, recently. And I feel as if many moons ago, we started talking about the larger impact that student debt was having in communities across the country, across the Commonwealth. And it's just like such a pleasure to talk to people who realize the generational impact that student debt is having. And I think just to set the stage. So I've been traveling all across the country for years, all across places like the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the number one question I always get is, we hear about student loan debt on the news, we read about it in the paper, is it as bad as people are making it out to be? And I think my response is always, no, it's actually quite a bit worse. So to give you some sense of scale, there is now 1.7 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars of student loan debt. That means nearly 45 million Americans get a student loan bill each and every month. So there's more student loan debt than there is all car loans in America. There's more student loan debt than there's all credit card debt in America. And what you see is that more borrowers are taking on a lot more debt. And, there's this misperception out there that, we are in the mess we are in because a whole bunch of millennials ate too much avocado toast or, whatever meme it is. But nothing could be further from the truth. And I'm sure, the people watching, the people you represent understand this. So while I was at the CFPB, we did one of the first real analysis and found that the fastest growing segment of student loan borrowers are actually older Americans who are more and more being forced to take on student debt, for themselves as they lose jobs and as they try to pick up retraining or enter a new career, but also they're being forced at record numbers to sign on the dotted line for their kids or their grandkids. So this is really an intergenerational problem. And I think just the other thing is student loan borrowers are really hurting. This is before any of us ever knew what COVID was, right? So 1 in 4 student loan borrowers was behind on their loans before the crisis hit. So last year in America, 1.2 million borrowers defaulted on their loans. So if you do the math, another borrower defaulted on their debt every 26 seconds of every single day. And this has enormous ramifications, which I know we've talked about and we'll talk about today, that are beyond just those borrowers, right? Student loan debt is impacting people's ability to save for retirement, to buy homes, to accrue wealth. It's driving income inequality. It's really impacting communities like Scranton. And I think we are seeing borrowers really struggle. And I know we're seeing more and more elected officials, more and more leaders try to think through how they could stand up and kind of fight back on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what are some of the things what's been going on in this COVID? I mean, to your point, we've been talking, you and I have been talking about this for years. This is not a new thing, but COVID has exacerbated a lot of this as, unemployment has risen, or people might still have their jobs, but the raise never came, or they've had to take a pay cut, or they're just generally worried about the future. There's a lot of uncertainty out there. And student loan payments are maybe something that they can't prioritize. Right. Maybe their partner has lost an income and they need to prioritize a mortgage over a student loan. So are there actions that Congress has taken that have helped this, or things that are helping, or on the other side, hurting right now?
Yeah, so we have seen some positive developments. So to get like a little in the weeds, so there are really kind of 2 types of student loans. There are actually quite a bunch of student loans, but just for our sake, so there are loans that the federal government has actually made and holds, and there's kind of everything else. And the overwhelming number of loans the government has actually made at this point, like a whopping $1.3 trillion. So Congress, and through executive actions, have actually paused those payments. So borrowers, if you have one of those loans, you actually don't need to make a payment this year. And that's really positive, right? I think it has allowed people to kind of take a breath on their student loans, figure out how to reallocate that money, especially if they lost a job. This is one less bill they have to worry about. But I think there's serious flaws in Washington's current approach to this, right? Because in a lot of ways, this is merely kicking the can down the road. That for even those borrowers whose payments have been paused, they were hurting before the crisis. I don't think that anyone thinks by December 31st, most Americans are going to be back on their feet, right? So I think we have seen how when strategies like this have been employed in the past, so this is generally what Ed does after a natural disaster, is pause people's payments, you actually ultimately see like the rates of delinquency and defaults really spike after, as people are still in a worse financial situation, or it's hard for their student loan company to get in touch with them again, and then they really struggle to pay you back. So I think we are really, really worried what it looks like for even borrowers whose payments have been paused come January. But the second piece about this is that there are all these loans that the federal government doesn't hold. Almost 9 million borrowers have one of these loans. And right now, Washington has done nothing to help these people. And I think we hear every single day from those borrowers who are desperate for help, who are literally choosing their student loan bill over putting food on the table or keeping a roof over their head. And I think you probably know this better than I do, the fear of mass evictions, down the horizon, just really is compounded, I think, by student loans. And I think one thing just to flag, I forgot this in the introduction, is Pennsylvania has been hit exceedingly hard by the student debt crisis. I think it's graduates in the state, in the Commonwealth, have like the second highest balances upon leaving the state.
Wow.
And
in the whole country? That's in the whole nation.
And the borrowers in Pennsylvania leave school with the second highest balances in the whole nation. Wow. There's like 1.75 million student loan borrowers in the state, and they have like $71 billion of debt. So, I think one of the things that, we've been talking about with elected officials kind of from the east to the west and the northeast, right, is like, this is an issue that is severely holding back an entire generation and more, within the state.
Wow. So what are there things that people should be doing if they do have those public loans from the federal government? Are there things that you suggest that people do now to prepare for the sunset of that pause at the end of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. So to be clear, so the pause is automatic. So people, if that's now, but it's a great question because again, December is coming fast. So something that everyone should know is that if you have a loan held by the federal government, there are protections and rights that you have if you lose your job, if your income goes down, and these are long-term. You could still be in good standing and not make a payment on your student loan for a whole year, not just kind of at the will of what Washington, D.C. chooses. So I think what we've been encouraging everyone is, if you've lost your job, if you've lost a bunch of hours at work, if you've been furloughed, if you're struggling to figure out how you're going to make your student loan, call now. Call now, figure out what your options are. I think one of the other things we've talked about a lot is the challenges that borrowers face with the student loan industry. And we have worked, and you have an amazing attorney general in Josh Shapiro, who's been on the forefront of a lot of these issues. So we have a ton of concerns that one day the student loan industry is going to be told to turn on 35 million accounts overnight. And I think if you are struggling, you do not want to be caught up in that deluge. So again, if you have a student loan and you're really worried about how you're going to pay it off down the road, now is the time to try to reach out to your student loan company. And if you feel like you're not getting good answers, is to reach out to Josh Shapiro's office, reach out to the CFPB, and tell them that you're not getting the information you need.
Right. And that's something that you and I have talked about for a long time, is that there is support and help out there, that your conversation about this doesn't have to end with the entity that holds your loan. The CFPB is there to help you, at least it's designed that way. But there are other places that you can go if you feel that you're not getting an answer. So in Pennsylvania, Attorney General Shapiro has a really good team that works on this. And then, does your organization take those types of calls, or if people go to your website, can they get a list of resources?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're small but mighty, our team at the Student Borrower Protection Center, but we do have resources available at protectborrowers.org. We actually have a COVID resource guide for information so that borrowers know where to turn. We have contact information about where, if you're getting bad information or no information, who to complain to. And I think one of the things that is just really important, and I always kind of close with this, so maybe I'm jumping the gun, is just if you have student loan debt, like just know that you're not alone. Like there is no shame in this. There are 45 million people like you and me who every day are trying to figure this out. And I think one of the things we've seen is reach out for help. And if you're not getting the answers, file complaints, tell elected officials, because you're not only complaining on behalf of yourself, you're complaining on behalf of all of those people like you who are probably having the same situation. While we were at the CFPB, I can't tell you the number of times where we got a little more complaints about an issue, and it turned out that this was impacting literally millions of people.
Right.
And I think, if you're not going to do it for yourself, do it for your neighbor, or do it for, that person who doesn't have the time, who's working a double shift, who can't figure this out, because there are people out there who can help.
Right. Yeah, that's something that we talk about on these town halls every single week. These town halls started during COVID. I used to do them Tuesdays and Fridays. Hopefully we don't get back into having to do them twice a week. But if, in terms of the public health crisis, if it exacerbates, we'll certainly get back to more frequent communication. But every week we talk about it. And student debt goes hand in hand with everything else we talk about in terms of not being afraid to raise your hand and ask for help. Mental health is a really big problem always. You should never feel shame, but especially with COVID, there are so many instances of things. Life has come at all of us so quickly. So you never have to be afraid you shouldn't be afraid to raise your hand for mental health, for, utilities help, for food insecurity, for student debt, and all of these things. No one is alone. That should be something that I hope everyone is taking to heart with this crisis, that, I know that so many people say we're all into this together, that it starts to sound a little bit cheesy, but this is at the heart of what that means, is that your student debt is not just you, it's millions and millions of people, yours truly included. All of these things are things that millions of people are dealing with, and we have resources out there. I see so much of my role here as mayor of Scranton to pump those resources out and to be able to connect with people like you and make sure that people understand there are resources out there. What does that look like? Where can I go for help? One thing that you and I talked about a lot is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, the PSLF. And I know that not everyone on this Facebook would have that apply, but I know, I have graduate loans, so it doesn't apply, and I haven't applied for anything. But I know I have friends who work in public service and have had trouble themselves with PSLF. If there's, teachers, first responders out there, government workers who have questions about their public service loan forgiveness, are there resources out there right now? And kind of generally, like, I know that there are some issues with that program. Is that getting better, or is it kind of gotten worse?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So for those who don't know, the federal government made a promise around a decade ago, which is if you serve in your community for 10 years and pay off as much as your loan during that time, whatever is left, they'll forgive. And it's obviously Washington, so it's a lot more complicated than that, right? And there's a lot of kind of hoops to jump through. But it's a really important program, as you said, for teachers and nurses and service members and first responders. But unfortunately, we have seen a really long history of both incompetence at the Department of Education and some pretty troubling practices at the student loan industry. So we have seen, unfortunately, how there's now a 99% denial rate for borrowers in this who try to apply to get their loans forgiven. Congress actually stepped in and passed a fix to the 99%, which has a 94% denial rate, which is bad. And I don't want it to lead, because this is so important to so many people. And I think that there are steps that people should take to reach out to ensure that you have the right type of loan, to ensure that you are in an eligible repayment plan. And again, a lot of this comes down to unfortunately reaching out to your student loan company and saying, hey, I'm in public service loan forgiveness, am I eligible? And if you think you are, and they tell you you're not, to document all the mistakes that people have told you along the way, because essentially that's how change has come. I think we have seen how, for example, the American Federation of Teachers, on behalf of its members, actually filed a lawsuit for teachers who were lied to about their eligibility for this program. We've seen people who work at nonprofits actually sue the Department of Education and win because they were told that they were eligible and they rescinded. So I think this is one where try to learn the facts, and as early as possible, reach out to your student loan company. We have information on our website. If you're in a labor union, talk to them. Many of them have resources to help guide you through this process because it is so critical. I mean, I think what we've seen, and I think this was just a point I wanted to make before, as you mentioned, part of the point about raising your hand that I always make on student loan debt is, I was joking about the avocado toast thing, right? But it is true. I'm interested in your take. In Washington, a lot of times people with student debt are portrayed as, everyone's a rich lawyer, right? Or like, this is just a big city type issue. And like, nothing could be further from the truth. We kind of dug up the best information we could find that 7 in 10 people in the Scranton area have student loan debt. 1 in 6 are behind. We've seen some data that shows that balances increased for residents by like 18% last year, or like the top third in the nation, right? And I think by demonstrating that this is like intergenerational, this is impacting communities like Scranton, I think that's how we drive change, because you can't just deem this a Center City, Philly, or, a Pittsburgh problem. And I'm sure you feel this, you're doing so much to try to make the local economy thrive and bring back businesses and have a good workforce. But it's hard when the average person is trying to figure out how to make a $800 student loan bill, right? Or a $400. It's just impacting labor markets, and it's impacting smaller communities' economies. And the more people talk about it, the more people kind of fight through the traditional shame we have over student debt. I think that's how we generally try to drive like larger change to help people.
Right. And that student debt can be whether you went to medical school or whether you went and got a nursing degree. Maybe you went to a college to learn how to do something in the trades. You still have debt in the trades. Student debt isn't only for a degree in the humanities that which person like me maybe would have gotten 20 years ago. I love the humanities. That's not, but it spans every sector, every career. Student loan debt isn't just for a 4-year degree. Student loan debt is for master's degrees. Student loan debt is for associate's degrees, for a variety of things. And so you have student loan debt that might be just for training certificates, where people, are trying to make ends meet, or they had to get a certificate to get the next level of their job. But if that job didn't come with increased pay, then they might still be struggling to pay that off. So yeah, it spans all income levels, all sectors, public and private. And it really, every family, I mean, I don't know. I can't think of a family that I know that doesn't have someone in the generations that has some level of student loan debt. And part of it too, in terms of removing the stigma, is the cost of these things. That, my parents were able to go to college and they worked really, really, really hard. And back to the firefighting, my father was a firefighter during college in the summers to pay for his school. But back then, and even 20 years ago, I think when I went to a state school, it was possible to work and make enough money as a student to then pay for your tuition. That is not the case anymore. And that's part of it too, I think, where the avocado toast is unfair, is that if 20 years ago I was able, would have been able to work enough to pay my tuition and make ends meet, that is not possible at this point. That job as a bank teller or waitressing is not going to be enough to pay tuition at a state school in Pennsylvania right now. And that's a huge difference with this generation from even just when I was in school.
And also just so much how much the program now is setting up people to fail. Like, I can't tell you the number of people that we've met in Pennsylvania and beyond who take out $25,000 over the course of 8 to 10 years, pay back $20,000 and look at their bill and somehow owe $27,000 still, right? I think what we see is that the like student loans are like a particularly like nefarious sort of instrument that people really struggle with. And then I think just the other thing I wanted to raise here is there's the issue of student loan debt, and then there's the issue of a lot of predatory actors out there who are trying to get rich off the back of the student debt crisis. It's lenders, it's schools, it's debt collectors, it's scammers. And especially during this time, I think we're really worried because kind of like the financial fraudsters always come out during recession. So I think the number one piece of advice is, if you're struggling with your student loans, never pay anyone to help you, right? I think there's a whole cottage industry of scammers out there who know that people are struggling, promise them relief. These programs are free to apply if you have a federal loan, or you can negotiate with your lender. But there are, every single day you hear from the CFPB or an attorney general or the Federal Trade Commission going after another student loan company who tricked the most vulnerable borrowers to give away the last dollar in their pocket to try to help them with their student debt when that was entirely free. So I think the number one thing for people watching is, if you're struggling, don't pay for someone to help you with your debt. We know it's frustrating because a lot of times you're not getting an answer out of your actual student loan company, but trying to pay a third party is nearly without fault always a scam, and you will end up worse off. I think the second piece is, be really cognizant of the claims of universities, of especially for-profit schools right now. So we see during the recessions, for-profit schools tend to thrive on people who are out of work. They make a lot of promises about their ability to retrain borrowers, about their ability to get borrowers back on their feet. And often the degrees aren't worth the paper they're printed on. You can't actually sit for the licensing exam, or you can't get a job in the field they promise. So just be really cautious. And I know people are struggling and they're trying to figure out what's next. And we're seeing the jobs numbers, which show a lot of employers are moving away for good or going away for good. And I think people are trying to figure out what's next. So take a breath and pause and try your best to do research about the promises that schools are made. Look at state schools, look at community colleges, and it's hard to do your homework, because I think we're worried about what comes out on the other side when people view this as their chance to get rich.
Right. Well, maybe you just answered part of the answer to the question that we got from the audience. So the question is, how would a student manage massive amounts of debt that they accrued pre-COVID with a job that doesn't pay well with a degree?
Sure.
So part of that, maybe just
yeah, so I think the number one issue is to know what type of loans you have, because that's really going to govern a lot of what your rights and protections are. So if you have a federal loan, which is like 90% of student debt in America, there are actually a ton of benefits and protections available. And the phrase you should know is an income-driven repayment plan. And I know it's like super wonky, but it's actually really powerful. And what it means is, if you have a federal student loan and you're struggling, you could actually pay not based on how much you ever took out, but how much you make. And depending on what type of loan it is, you could pay in a given month no more than 10% of your discretionary income towards the loan, regardless of what that huge balance is. So I think the top piece of advice is, know what type of loan it is. If it's a federal loan, start talking to your student loan company about getting enrolled into one of their repayment plans, if that's available. If you feel like you're getting the runaround, I would file a complaint and let them know that you are talking to Attorney General Shapiro's office. I think he's starting to build a pretty good track record with some of these companies that they do not want to see complaints filed with him. So that would be my number one piece of advice. To the extent that there are private loans, I think it's obviously harder. They don't have to guarantee, but a lot of lenders will have their own kind of in-house plans, which let you pause payments or eliminate payment or minimize payments for at least a couple years. But really check out the federal loans on the income-driven repayment.
Yeah. So something that I would think would be confusing that you could speak to is, if you have a federal loan, it may be serviced by a private company, and that could be very confusing.
Correct.
So maybe speak for a couple
Yeah.
seconds about how that works and what to look for, because you might have a federal loan. A lot of people have federal loans, but the servicer, you don't call the government, you call a private company.
You stole my line that, like, for all the 30 plus million people who have a student loan the government holds, you don't pick up the phone and Betsy DeVos isn't on the other end of the line. So what happened is the government has actually contracted out with a bunch of private sector companies to actually manage that debt, to actually be the ones who interface with you. So the names you might recognize are Navient, Nelnet, the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Authority, which might also go by Fed Loans. There's a couple other smaller ones, Mohila and others. I think I mentioned Nelnet and Great Lakes. And so those are actually private sector companies, but they are the ones that are managing your federal loans. And it is quite confusing. But I think the most important thing is, like, those companies are supposed to help you. Sometimes those companies disagree with that statement, but they make lots and lots of money to try to help you navigate your loans. And I think getting a basic understanding about who holds your debt, what type of loan it is, I think really empowers borrowers to then try to figure out what rights and protections that they have. And again, just know that too often these companies will try to give you the runarounds, and it's important to fight to try to get good answers, to let them know that you're going to follow up, and that, again, if there are problems, that you're willing to file a complaint.
It's being your own advocate, and we're lucky that you are there to be an advocate for all student borrowers. That is the thing, is that you have to, same with in healthcare, right? You have to be your own advocate. Nobody is going to pay more attention to your health or your child's health than you. So you've got to keep at it and make sure that you're using the resources. So I know that I think that somebody from your team put is it protectborrowers.org?
Yep.
That in there. So protectborrowers.org. You guys have a specific COVID link in there that can show some of the resources. And I know that you're always there, and I appreciate that you are only a phone call away for me as we have questions that come in. I think that I would have wanted you to come and talk to Scranton in some way this first year that I'm in office. I'm sorry that it's via Zoom, and I'm sorry that it's in the horrible time that we're living in, but I would love for us to continue the conversation, and maybe if things are a little bit better next year, maybe you could come up in person, and maybe we could do something where you could really get that message out to people, because this problem's not going away. And we have an incredible network. We have 14 colleges and universities between Lackawanna and Luzerne County. We have some really, really forward thinking leadership in our institutions here we're really trying to track the trends in the economy and match the education opportunities that we have here, not just at the secondary level, at the college and university level, but within our school districts as well. But I don't want to leave out how to pay for it, right? I don't want to leave out all the information that you have about how to make sure you're entering into loans that you can sustain. When you mentioned the parent loan piece, I worry about that too, that you have lenders out there saying, oh yeah, just take this out for your kid. And who doesn't want to help their kid? But that needs to come with the right type of loan, and you don't want people over borrowing and those types of things. So I would love if we can continue the conversation. I mean, maybe hopefully in person in 2021.
Absolutely. I would love nothing more. I've been hearing about the 570 area code most of my life. You can't judge me because I still have a 215, but as long as that condition, I look nothing more than getting back out on the road. So we'll schedule this as one of the first stops. So
thank you. Well, it's really wonderful to see you. Thank you for everything that you and your team does every day to protect borrowers. It really, really is important. And thank you for saying that saying the raise your hand piece, because I'm about to say it in a couple more times when I give the mental health numbers again. That's so much of, again, what we need to keep reminding each other is that you gotta raise your hand when you need help.
all right. Thank you so much. And thanks for everything you're doing.
Thanks, Seth. See you soon. All right. Yeah, the numbers for student loan debt are just staggering. So thank you to, I think it's Michael that had that question a few weeks ago. Really appreciate that, reminding us that we need to do something on student loans on one of these town halls. So let me just get into a couple of the other resources that we have, and then if there are questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Let's see, mayor's, quickly, our where am I here? Our neighborhood initiative. Today we're at Fellows Park for 1 more hour, or actually we're going till 6 p.m. maybe, at least till 2 p.m., maybe 6. We'll be at Fellows Park. That's the neighborhood initiative today. So smoke alarms, sign up, blight complaints, recycling bins, all those things you can get. You can also answer the census. The Census Bureau is there. And then we also have the pop-up library, which is great. The census is due September 30th. Next week, we are going to have a census day of action. So next Friday, September 18th, I'll do my town hall at noon, and then from 12:30 to 2:30, we're going to have our day of action. We'll get you more information about that, but we're trying to draw as much attention to the census as possible. And we'll be going through the city to make a bit of a show of it. So make sure people know what's going on and that the census is due very, very soon. We also have a sign up for our Mayor's Volunteer Corps. It's a survey right now to see what you're interested in, and then we're making sure that we can shape our volunteer corps in a way that best works for the city and for the volunteers. There are three buckets that we have right now. It's parks, neighbor-to-neighbor assistance, and neighborhood cleanup, but we're also taking other ideas. So please sign up. You can go to our social media page or scrantonpa.gov and take the survey for the Mayor's Volunteer Corps. And then coming up September 13th through 19th, NeighborWorks is doing a West Scranton neighborhood cleanup. Each day they'll post a new challenge on the NeighborWorks Facebook page for the neighbors to complete. All the challenges are designed to make West Scranton an even better and tidier place to live, and do so safely with social distancing in mind. So that's fantastic. So NeighborWorks NEPA Facebook page, starting on the 13th, so starting Sunday through the 19th, there'll be a new neighborhood cleanup challenge each day. That's a very cool thing. So thanks NeighborWorks for always doing such good work. And we have the Scranton Police Department Pen Pal program. If you are under 18, or up to 18 rather, or have a special needs individual in your home, you can sign up to be a pen pal with a member of the SPD. You can mail the letters to SPD Attention Pen Pal Program, 100 South Washington Avenue, and that's 18503. So that, and the election, it is not too late to register to vote or to get a mail-in ballot application. Go to votespa.com to make sure that you are registered, or those in your household who will be 18 on election day, November 3rd, will be registered. And that because we don't know what it'll be like by November, we might be, if COVID starts to tick up again, it might be a time where we're really, really wanting people to stay home. So that mail-in ballot is really important to get that, be able to vote from the comfort and safety of your own home, get that mail-in ballot application turned in, get the ballot, return it, then you don't have to go to the polls on November 3rd again, because we are not quite sure what things will look like then. Hopefully we won't get back to where we were in the spring, but we have to plan for that. And as always, it's never bad to raise your hand if you need help. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255. Or if you want to text, you can always text TALK, TALK, to 741-741. The Veteran Crisis Line is important, especially today as we remember 9/11 and all of our first responders and our veterans. The Veterans Crisis Line is 1-800-273-TALK, or 1-800-273-8255. Let me see if we have any more questions today. I know that we got a little bit of a late start. It's been a busy day here. Let me just make sure. Let's see if there's any more in the chat. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat. Let's see. We haven't had any deaths from COVID in the county in 10 days, which is excellent. But we are, we're seeing the numbers that there are still cases out there. So the virus is still here. We really, really have to keep at this. And I think that people are really getting used to the masks, which is huge. And we know that, the real keys to this are being outside and wearing a mask. So we got to get used to the masks. And as the weather gets colder, though, we've got to, got some work to do to figure out how we are able to still do our work and socialize with the cold weather. I think, unfortunately, we're going to probably have to be doing some things remotely again, and not seeing, family and friends in person as much again. So we have to be ready mentally, I think, for that, and make sure that we're preparing for a bit of a tough ride in this fall. So that's weighing heavily on my mind. We're here at City Hall, we're ready, and we're working on continuing to improve our IT to be able to continue all of our services. But in your own household, make sure that your loved ones have the ability to communicate should we be in that situation again. Okay, I do have one question from the crowd. I filled out the census when it came out. Why are census workers still knocking on my door? That's a really interesting question, Tina. I don't have an answer to that. I don't know why that would be the case. So my team can find that out, and we'll try to get an answer back to you, and get that back into the social media page. I'm not sure why that would be the case, because of course, if you have filled it out to your address with that PIN, they should have you already counted. So we'll get an answer to you for that, Tina, and try to make sure that's not happening too much, because we want those census workers knocking on doors of the people who haven't answered. So we'll get you an answer to that. Anything else? Trying to think. Food drive. Friends of the Poor has the next food drive, I think, on the 23rd. So I forgot to say that. Let's see. Yep. Parker Hill Church. No, excuse me. The next food drive is September 23rd at Scranton High School. So Scranton High, September 23rd. So we will, we are always thankful to Friends of the Poor for all the work they're doing. So September 23rd, Scranton High School. That's the other one. I don't see any other questions. We'll be back next week. As always, if you have questions, you can always email us at scranton311@scrantonpa.gov. We're happy to answer your questions. And also, like we always say, happy to get your feedback. We're trying so hard at the city here to make sure that we are serving the community and that we are there for everyone in our community. That's very, very important to me and all of the team here at the city. So if you're having an issue, we want to hear about it, and we want to see how we can help. Unless it's an emergency, we can't always help immediately every single day. We have a big city, and we're trying really hard to get to everything as soon as we can. But we're really, really trying hard to get to everyone and help everyone in every block in the city. So have a good weekend. Enjoy the outside weather. Enjoy each other, masked, of course, and in smaller groups. And we're going to keep doing everything we can to plan for the fall and try to get through this virus together. Thank you.